Hi there, I'm Dr. B, and welcome to my training, Something's Up with My Kid. This is the Life Dissatisfaction module. And before I get started, I just want to take a moment to remind you that if you have not already printed out the handouts that came with the program when you purchased the course, take a moment here to pause and go print out the handouts because I want you to get the most out of this course. And if you have the handouts handy, then you'll be able to take notes. And as you can see, I take notes. So, have the handouts handy as we go through the module together in case there's anything you want to jot down. Just a little bit about how this module is going to flow. It's going to flow just as the others do. First, I'm going to go through the psychological problem or the risk that we're seeing related to interactive screen time. I'm going to talk about the reason it's a problem, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what to do about it. Okay? So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so let's first review some evidence that life satisfaction is suffering. I'm not going to drown you in research statistics, but I do want to cover a few studies that bubble to the top for me so that we have a good context of the problem before we go on to the reasons why it's a problem and what we can do about it. So when the first group of iGen became high school seniors around 2012, 2013, their responses to survey questions started to show that their life satisfaction started to drop dramatically, hitting all-time lows in 2015. Now keep in mind that the first smartphone, or the first iPhone, was released in 2007. So, as iPhones and smartphones came on the scene, it seemed like, life satisfaction started to decrease dramatically. So there's 4 recent studies that suggest that social media and smartphone dependency are strongly related to unhappiness. I'm going to review these 4 studies. The first 2 have to do with mood and Facebook use. One involves college students and the other one involves adults. The third study I'm going to review involves adults who were split into 2 groups. One was told to stop using Facebook for a week while the other continued to use Facebook. And the 4th study I'll review looks at young adults, loneliness, depressive symptoms, and smartphone dependency. So the first study involved college students who were surveyed over a 2-week period, and they were asked to rate their mood and their Facebook use. And what they had found was the more that the participants had used Facebook, the unhappier they later felt. When they controlled for certain constructs, they found that feeling unhappy did not lead to Facebook use, but rather their Facebook use led to feelings of unhappiness. In a similar study looking at adults, again, they were asked to survey their mood and their Facebook use over a 2-week period. And what they found was more Facebook use led to lower mental health and lower life satisfaction at the next time of assessment. But what this study also looked at was how interacting with a friend in person influenced their mental health and life satisfaction. And they found that when a participant had interacted with their friend in person, their mental health and their life satisfaction had improved. So I'm going to talk about why that is in the reason section, but I wanted to point that out that, there are some protective factors when it comes to interacting with people in person versus on a smartphone or on social media. So the third study I'm going to talk about involved 1,095 Danish adults who were randomly assigned to either continue using Facebook as usual or to stop using Facebook for a week. And what they found is that those who had stopped using Facebook for a week were happier, less lonely, and less depressed at the end of that week compared to those who had continued using Facebook as usual, and the differences were substantial. They were 36% fewer were lonely, 33% fewer were depressed, and 9% more were happy. In another study of 346 individuals aged 18 to 20, they were surveyed with questions designed to measure loneliness, depressive symptoms, and their smartphone dependency. And in this study, what they found was that smartphone dependency preceded symptoms of depression and loneliness. So what that means is that, the individual became or was dependent on their smartphone first and then started to develop the symptoms of depression and loneliness. So the risk for unhappiness seems to be highest for our younger teens. 8th graders who spend 10 or more hours a week, and keep in mind that's less than an hour and a half a day on social media, were 56% more likely to be unhappy compared to 39% for 10th graders and 14% for 12th graders. So 8th graders are likely more vulnerable to the effects of social media because they're still developing their identities. They're in the throes of adolescence. They're often struggling with body image issues, and you throw in social media and the risk of cyberbullying, and it's a recipe for disaster. Older teens are, they're less likely to bully one another. They're more confident in themselves because they're getting used to their developing bodies. They're more mature. And this aspect of being older protects them somewhat from the negative aspects of social media. So, I know right now there's a movement out there amongst parents that say wait till 16, which I totally agree with. If anything, I'd say even wait till 17 if you could, because the longer that you wait to have your child on social media, the more it protects them from some of the negative aspects of social media in terms of being bullied. As kids get older, they start to grow out of the more verbally aggressive types of attacks that can happen. So again, the longer you can wait to have your child on social media, the better. So again, we just reviewed a little bit of evidence that life satisfaction is suffering. My intention is to provide you with some evidence to give you a context for the problem, and now we're going to move on to the reasons why we're seeing this problem. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the reasons it's a problem section. I'm going to review 5 reasons why life satisfaction is decreasing in our teens. The first reason is social comparison. Then I'm going to talk about adolescent egocentrism, which is a normal developmental stage of adolescence, but I'm going to talk about how it becomes problematic when we have social media and smartphones. I'm going to talk about the Paleolithic brain and our need for social approval, competition and feelings of inferiority related to social media use, and solitude, or really the lack of solitude that we're seeing amongst our adolescents right now. So teens who spend a lot of time on social media are mostly comparing themselves or being compared. Online life is a major enabler of the desire to compare. Girls are especially vulnerable because they're asked to compare in ways that boys just aren't. They compare how they look, who has more likes, some becoming obsessed with getting likes or who's following them on social media. Adolescent egocentrism is a normal part of adolescent development. All adolescents, regardless of whether they have a smartphone or they're on social media, go through this stage of development. And what it is it's a time of heightened self-consciousness that's thought to incorporate 2 types of social processing thinking, right? The first type is the imaginary audience. So this is when the adolescent thinks that everyone is as interested in them as they are in themselves, right? So this could lead to attention-getting behaviors or the desire to be visible, to be noticed. Can you see why social media and this type of thought processing could be problematic? Like this is when adolescents think everyone's paying attention to them, or they act out in ways to get more attention. So this could lead them to post provocative things or inappropriate content that could get them into trouble. So, again, like with this normal stage of adolescent development in terms of this way that all adolescents think at one point or another, when you combine it with social media, it could really make things sticky for your child. The other part of adolescent egocentrism is the personal fable. So this involves the adolescent sense of uniqueness or invincibility, right? So this stage of social processing can cause the adolescent to not think anything bad is going to happen as a result of their risky behavior. So I want to take a moment here and just, point out that while like this generation is being characterized as being more cautious, not engaging in as much risky behavior, I want to point out that I'm not sure that necessarily applies to their online behavior. When we're characterizing them as more cautious, I think it's really looking at behaviors like, they're not drinking alcohol as much. They're waiting till they're older to drink alcohol. They're not using drugs as much. It's like looking at those types of behavior. But when we look at their online behavior, it's not uncommon for a 13-year-old to ask for or send nude pictures of themselves. So if we think about this stage of development in terms of like the personal fable and this type of social processing, if we take this example of sending nude pictures, right? Like the personal fable, like adolescents don't think anything bad is going to happen as a result of their risky behavior. They don't think there's going to be a consequence to their risky behavior. So let's take the example of, maybe an adolescent girl really likes this boy and he asks her for a nude picture and she really likes him and she wants him to like her. So she sends the nude picture and things are okay for a while, but then something goes wrong in the relationship, right? Like something goes wrong, they are no longer friends, and next thing you know, that nude picture is being spread amongst her whole school, all of her peers, and she's devastated, right? Like this is an example of how the personal fable can play out in an undesirable way when our teens have access to social media. Okay, so again, just things to think about, like normal adolescent developmental stage, but how things can go awry when our kids are on this new technology. So the next thing I want to talk about is our Paleolithic brain, which is a topic I love. So the Paleolithic brain and our need for social approval, right? So we as human beings are social beings, right? We cannot completely ignore what others think of us because this behavior is adaptive, right? Like back in Paleolithic times, like we needed to live in tribes and be in good social standings with other people in our tribe for our survival, right? Like it was much better for us to be with other people, to be in our tribe, to have support, to work together in order for us to survive versus trying to survive on your own. So new technology has hijacked our deep vulnerability to be connected to other people, right? Because we have evolved over tens of thousands of years to need to be with other people in terms of our survival, right? So we have this deep-seated need to be with other people. But come the past 13 years since the smartphone has really come on the scene, and all of a sudden we are connected to so many more people than maybe we're supposed to be connected to or that we're meant to be connected to. And so being connected to all of these people still plays on that deep-seated vulnerability need to be connected, but it's just on a much bigger scale. So I want us to consider for a moment the feedback buttons on social media. So if you're not sure what I mean by that, I simply mean like clicking like on Facebook or clicking the heart on Instagram. These features that are built into social media that allow us to, let other people know what we think of their post, and lets us know what other people think of our post just by a simple click, simple like change of an icon. Okay. But the reason I want us to consider this is because, in addition to delivering unpredictable feedback, which has to do with how addictions are developed, this feedback also concerns other people's approval of us, right? So if we post something and a lot of people like it, we feel good. We feel as if we are supported by our tribe, that our tribe approves of us, right? But on the other hand, if we post something and we don't get a lot of likes, this can be distressing, right? Because we feel as if like we're not being approved, or people aren't supporting us, and this turns into like major business for the Paleolithic brain. Like, this is serious for our Paleolithic brain. We start to then have this compulsive urge to check to see if people are liking, or to like check in on this vital information, because again, it's playing into this deep-seated vulnerability of ours to be connected to others. Okay. So this also explains this phenomenon right now amongst teens to keep up their Snapchat streak. So what that means is like it's how many days in a row a teen is, interacting with another teen on Snapchat, like something along those lines. But anyway, so it explains like this trend of teens to keep up their Snapchat streak, because the longer the streak, the more confirmation of how strong the relationship is. So again, playing on this deep need of ours to be connected socially. So it also speaks to this universal urge to immediately check a text message. So I don't know, like, if you have noticed, but like since doing this research, I've started to pay attention to myself and when I get a text message, and how, I do have this urge to check in on it, even if I'm in like the middle of, some like serious work. If my phone's nearby and I get a text message, I feel this urge to check it. And it explains like why, even though like we all know the dangers of texting and driving, like why we feel so compelled to check our phones when a text message comes through while we're driving. Or for our kids, if they're in class and they're not supposed to be on their phones and they're picking up their phones because they're getting text messages, there's this strong urge to check in. But again, it has to do with our Paleolithic brain and our need for social connection. So, if we don't, the reason why like it becomes problematic is for our Paleolithic brain, when we see a text come in, to that part of our brain, like it's almost like snubbing someone at the communal fire, which would be like a major faux pas during those times, because you want to stay in good social standing so that you can stay a part of that tribe. So when a text message comes in, we have this strong urge to check it, because if we don't, we could be snubbing that person at the communal fire, right? So again, I want to point out like how new technology is, how it impacts our brains, right? Like we're not used to being this connected, and this is really very new for our brain that has evolved over like so many years. Like now having this access to this new technology, it's really playing on some of the vulnerabilities of our brain, and we're seeing how it's impacting our behaviors in ways that we're maybe not even aware of. Okay. So now let's move on to this increased sense of competition and inferiority, right? Like social media creates this. It creates this increased sense of competition and inferiority. Even if you're not like intending it to, like it's hard not to look on social media and see so-and-so's on this great trip, or so-and-so's hanging out with so-and-so and I'm not there. Like it's hard not to compare yourself in these ways and sometimes feel inferior. So girls especially are bombarded by and compared to idealized images all day long, which can lead them to having thoughts like, I'm never going to look like that, my life's never going to be as great as hers, her life is so perfect and mine is not. And when images are of peers that they actually know, the shame is even greater as the pressure to keep up is even more present in their daily lives. So, even if the images are clearly photoshopped, the pressure is still there to compete for likes. In the book, American Girls by Nancy Jo Sales, she interviews girls ages 13 through 19. And in these interviews, the girls talk about how if they post a selfie, they feel like compelled immediately to start checking for who's liking their picture, who's commenting on it, feeling, they state like, even like when they do get likes, the likes never feel like it's enough. They feel like they're brainwashed into wanting more likes, often becoming obsessed with getting more likes. And again, like this is where, when you think about that stage of the imaginary audience, like this is where, like if they're obsessed with getting more likes, they might start posting more provocative images in order to get more likes, since those seem to be the ones that are getting more likes for our teens, and just then they become obsessed with other people and how many likes they have on their post, so it's like this constant sense of competition and feeling as if it's not enough, like they need to do more. And really, like in a time when, we're bombarded by this constant stream of people posting the most glamorous, glorious aspects of their life, like it's hard for teens, but even us as adults, to not feel inept and as if we're not enough sometimes. I want to share, this story about a client of mine that I had within the past 2 years who, this girl, like she was adorable and she didn't feel as if she was enough, and she would talk about her friends and she would talk about how beautiful her friends were and how her friends were supermodels, and, then there was her. And so the one day I think she wanted to drive home the point of how beautiful her friends were and how she didn't compare to them, because they're all tall and thin and she was short. And, so she brought up her Instagram page for me to look at. And so, I looked at this page and I said, is that you? Because she had curated this, like this Instagram page that didn't even look like her, right? Like it was beautiful, and so was she in real life, but it was just different, right? Like it just looked different. And when I looked at it, I said, is that you? She said, yeah, it pays to have friends who are professional photographers, right? So this is an example of this, like how this competition and this feeling of inferiority drives our teens to, create these magnificent, like curated, pages that are fine. Like that's great. Okay, you make this page, but the problem comes is that when, they're meeting people online that they haven't met in person yet, and then they go to meet this person in person, there's this whole other level of self-consciousness that, like, are they, that I don't look exactly like my pictures on Instagram look, and is this person going to like me for who I am in real life, or are they just going to turn around and walk the other way? It's this sense of competition and inferiority that drives this need to create this image. But the hard part is the hard part is keeping up, but the other hard part is, when it's not the same in real life. And it's not that, anyone, that one is better than the other, it's just they're just different. And when they don't match, it creates that sense of not living up or not being good enough. Like there's a discrepancy between what they're portraying and who they really are. So now I want to move on to the topic of solitude, or really lack of solitude, that we're seeing amongst our teens and adolescents right now. Parents, like, think about this. Like, think about when you were a child and when you were an adolescent, like, how did you spend your time, right? Like, I hear this all the time. I have parents come in and they're like, when I was a kid or an adolescent, like, I used to leave the house in the morning, go out, like, do my own thing. I'd come home when my parents told me to. Like, there was this freedom to, experience life and develop this, like, rich inner life. Like, I have moms who talk about, like, oh, I used to write poetry, I used to write in my diary. Like, we're not hearing that anymore because when the average kid or adolescent spends 5 to 7 hours a day on their cell phone, it doesn't leave much room for times of solitude, for times to develop this rich inner life. So let me define solitude, right? So solitude is what's going on in your brain, not in the world around you. It's a subjective state in which your mind is free from input from other minds, right? It requires you to move past reacting to information created by other people and focuses instead on your own thoughts and your own experiences. Lately, it seems like we deprive ourselves of solitude by our preference for the digital screen, right? I went to Starbucks the other day and I left my phone in the car. And I go in, I order my coffee, and I'm waiting for my coffee, and I look around, and there's a group of adolescents at a table nearby. Well, first of all, I look around, everyone's on their phone. But I look at this table of adolescents, like 4 girls sitting at a table, all on their phone, right? So even, like, during these moments where, like, we could just have a moment to be alone with our thoughts, like, we end up, I think, almost, like, habitually picking up our phones and scrolling through or, trying to distract ourselves. But even when I see this group of girls together, they're together and still scrolling and not interacting with each other. So again, like, this idea of trying to develop these times to be with ourselves. And why should we do that, right? Like, why should we develop these times of solitude? So there are 3 crucial benefits of solitude. One is the ability to create new ideas. 2 is developing an understanding of ourselves. And 3 is developing closeness to others. Like, that one might sound kind of weird. Like, how does solitude help us develop closeness to others? Well, being able to calmly experience separation from others allows us to develop, like, anticipation and appreciation for when we do interact with others in person. So solitude deprivation is the state in which one spends nearly no time alone with their own thoughts and free from other people's minds, right? So when we avoid solitude, we start to miss out on the positive things it brings to us, which is the ability to clarify hard problems, to regulate our emotions, to build moral courage, to strengthen our relationships, right? Like, when we allow ourselves these times of solitude to just think, what happens in our brain, neuroscience is now starting to discover, is that we have this network in our brain called the default mode network. And what happens when we have times of solitude is this default mode network turns on, right? And this network helps us to problem solve, helps us to think things through. But the interesting thing about this network is that most of the time, the type of information this network processes is social information, right? So it helps us think through how to navigate social situations, how to solve social problems, how to interact with others, or if we're struggling with some kind of interaction that we had, like, how to rectify that, like, how to work through that, okay? So this is important things for our brains to develop and for us to think about, because it helps us to kind of grapple with some of the harder things we might deal with in our day-to-day life. So chronic solitude deprivation causes our quality of life to degrade. When we eliminate time alone with our thoughts, our mental health starts to suffer dramatically, which I think is part of the reason now that we're seeing these like massive increases in anxiety and depression, is because we're not allowing ourselves the time to be alone with our thoughts and kind of grapple with things that are going on in our lives, and giving ourselves times to like figure things out. Okay. So, just a quick recap. The 5 reasons why life dissatisfaction is occurring right now amongst our teens could be social comparison, the normal stage of adolescent egocentrism and how it's kind of playing out in this new media age, our Paleolithic brain and our need for social approval, the sense of competition and inferiority that comes with social media, and our lack of solitude. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the what to do about it section. This section covers the major concepts for how to nurture life satisfaction. It's not intended to be prescriptive, but it is intended to give you some guidance towards your own personal strategies. So I'm going to review 5 ways to positively affect your life satisfaction, or to help your child impact their life satisfaction. And it's going to be cultivating meaning, practicing mindfulness, practicing self-reflection, monitoring yourself, and increasing solitude. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is how to create meaning in your life. So the first thing you want to do if you think about, wanting to have a more meaningful life, you want to think about like, what do you love? Like what brings you joy? What are you passionate about? And it could be anything. It could be a hobby. It could be helping people. It could be playing with train sets. Like it could be anything that, gets you into this like flow state where you feel as if, you're engaging in things that give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Okay. The next thing you want to think about is like setting an intention to participate in these activities that you love, that bring you joy, that bring you meaning. Okay. The third thing you want to think about is vision, like having a long-term vision of how you're going to incorporate these things in your life that bring you meaning, that give you a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Okay, you want to think about like how you're going to incorporate these things into your life, and then start taking steps in order to have the long-term vision of having this meaning in your life. And the fourth thing you want to think about is engagement, like engagement with your environment, engagement in things that bring you joy, engagement in things that, you're passionate about, engagement in things that bring you meaning. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is mindfulness. Okay. So mindfulness is a huge buzzword right now. Everybody's talking about mindfulness and the benefits of mindfulness, but what exactly is mindfulness, right? So mindfulness is simply being grounded in the present moment. It's not thinking about what happened 5 minutes ago. It's not thinking about what you're going to do this afternoon. It's being grounded in the present moment, and recognizing what's going on with you right now. So when you ground yourself in the present moment, like you tune into, what am I thinking? What's going on in my mind? Am I having negative thoughts? Am I comparing myself to other people? What kind of self-talk am I engaging in? If you do find that you're engaging in negative thoughts and comparing yourself to other people, remember that, most people, if it's related to social media, like most people only post the most positive things about their lives, and you might only be getting a glimpse of like 20% of their lives, when really there's like 80% of their lives that you don't even know about. So remind yourself of this. If you find yourself engaging in this negative self-talk about how you don't compare or you don't live up, that you might not be comparing yourself to the whole picture, and And if you find yourself in that state of negative self-talk, try to shift it. Like, okay, so this part of my life I might not be feeling the best about right now, but what are some positive things going on in my life right now? And how do I shift to focus on those positive things so that I start to feel a little bit better in this moment? Another way to practice being mindful is putting your phone down, leaving it to the side, putting it in another room, and allowing yourself to just be present with yourself in this moment. Practicing some breath work can help. A technique that I share with all of my clients is, taking a deep breath in through your nose, filling your lungs all the way to the top. When you feel as if you can't fill them anymore, take one more sip of breath in, hold it for 2 counts, and then slowly exhale through your mouth, making your exhale be about 2 counts longer than your inhale. Doing this type of breathing turns on your relaxation response and kind of, helps center you in the present moment and helps bring on some relaxation in the body. Another thing related to mindfulness is practicing self-reflection, right? So this simply is like, tuning in and thinking about, like, why do I do what I do, right? Like, what does it matter if I post something on social media and people don't like it? Why am I looking for likes about that thing I posted on social media? What happens if I don't keep up on social media? Does it really, am I going to be shunned if I'm not keeping up on social media? Why do I feel this way? Why am I feeling unhappy with my life? Like, why am I engaging in these things that really aren't bringing me joy? And some of these questions are in the self-reflection questions that are included in your handouts when you bought the course. So, you can use that as a guideline for yourself and help your child to become more self-reflective of why are you doing what you're doing, right? Another way to be self-reflective is to start keeping a journal, writing things down. The 5-minute journal is a great tool because it helps you it's already laid out for you, like 3 things that I'm grateful for, 3 things that are going to make today great, the mantras that you want to keep in mind during the day, but just being more reflective of why you're doing what you're doing so that you can start to live with more intention, which will help increase your life satisfaction. Monitor yourself, right? And when I say monitor yourself, I mean tune into your body and start to pay attention to how stress shows up for you, right? So it seems so stressful anymore. It's like a constant competition, whether it's on social media or just in real life. For us, for our kids, it's like, school and after school activities and keeping up with so-and-so or whatever it is. Like, these things are stressful, and stress shows up in our body in certain ways, but the way stress shows up for you is individual for you than the way stress shows up for me. Like, stress shows up differently for everyone. For some people, they get tension headaches. For other people, they get neck pain or they get an upset stomach. There's a number of different ways that stress can show up, but monitoring yourself and tuning into what does stress feel like for me is helpful, because then you can start to recognize when you're stressed so that you can start engaging in some coping strategies or some things that you can do to help decrease that stress in your life. The more that you're aware of how stress impacts you, the more that you can take steps to live a more balanced life. And again, which helps increase your life satisfaction. And again, put your phone down. It's hard to monitor yourself if you're constantly distracted or you're numbing out or you're not allowing yourself to tune into how you're really feeling. Put the phone down, tune into your body. Where am I holding tension? Where do I feel tight? Where do I feel uneasy? What feels uncomfortable for me? And is this stress showing up for me in my body? The last thing I'm going to talk about is increasing times of solitude, right? So we want to cultivate solitude for ourselves and for our children. We want them to learn how to be alone with their thoughts, to learn how to be bored and what to do when they're bored, right? You know, when my kids tell me they're bored, I'm like, good, you're bored. Go figure out what to do. You know, learn how to entertain yourself, like learn how to awaken your creativity and use your imagination. You know, leave your phone at home, like go outside, go for a walk, no iPod, no music, just go for a walk with your own thoughts in nature. Start to really spend some time with yourself so you can start to understand yourself and start to work through and problem solve some of the things going on in your life. Write a letter to yourself. You know, if sitting alone with your thoughts really isn't for you, you know, make it more active. Like write yourself a letter. This is a great way to cultivate solitude because you're writing your own thoughts down onto a piece of paper back to yourself. So again, increasing solitude can help increase life satisfaction. So again, I just reviewed 5 ways to positively affect your life satisfaction, and they were creating meaning in your life, practicing mindfulness, being self-reflective, monitoring yourself, and increasing solitude. And again, you know, this section covers major concepts for how to nurture life satisfaction, but it's not prescriptive. This is meant to be guidance for you to start to create your own personal strategies. Okay, so this was the module on life dissatisfaction. I hope it was helpful for you and that you've got some information that you can take away and you can start to, you know, practice some things to help your child and yourself increase your life satisfaction. Until next time, this is Dr. B signing off.